We live in a time where most people feel like life is something to be chased. Chased through effort, through pressure, through endless planning and constant tension. From the moment we wake up, we are told that if things are not moving fast enough, if results are not appearing, if recognition is not coming, then something must be wrong with us. So we push harder. We grip tighter. We try to control every detail. And paradoxically, the more we force life, the more it seems to resist us. The Stoics saw this pattern long before modern anxiety had a name. They observed that human suffering does not come from lack of effort, but from misplaced effort. From fighting what cannot be controlled. From demanding outcomes instead of mastering conduct. And they understood something subtle yet radical. When the inner order is correct, the outer world reorganizes itself naturally. Not because life obeys you, but because you finally stop working against it. Alignment, in Stoic terms, is not about bending reality to your will. It is about aligning your will with reality. When this happens, friction decreases. Confusion fades. Decisions become clearer. And what once felt blocked begins to move again, not through force, but through coherence. The first Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is this: control must be internal, never external. Most people exhaust themselves trying to manage outcomes. They obsess over how things should unfold, how others should behave, how fast progress should come. But Epictetus was brutally clear. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. Peace begins the moment this distinction becomes non-negotiable in your mind. When you attempt to control what is outside your command, timing, recognition, other people's choices, you create tension without leverage. You spend energy where you have no authority. And this inner disorder leaks into everything you do. Your actions become reactive. Your words carry anxiety. Your presence loses weight. But when control is relocated inward, something powerful happens. You stop asking, "How do I make this work?" and start asking, "How do I act correctly regardless of outcome?" This shift alone removes a massive amount of resistance from your life. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you always have the option of having no opinion. Not because nothing matters, but because your judgment is what turns events into suffering. Two people can face the same obstacle. One becomes bitter, the other becomes precise. The difference is not circumstance. It is inner governance. When you govern yourself well, life no longer needs to be fought. You show up prepared instead of desperate, calm instead of tense, decisive instead of scattered. And people respond to that. Opportunities respond to that. Not as a reward, but as a consequence. Alignment begins here. Not with asking life to cooperate with you, but with you cooperating with reality. When your focus stays on what is yours to command, your actions, your values, your discipline, life gradually stops pushing back. Because you are no longer pushing first. This is not passivity. It is precision. And precision is the foundation of everything that follows. The second Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is learning to move in harmony with time instead of treating it as an obstacle to overcome. Most people live with a quiet but constant feeling that life should already look different by now. They carry an invisible clock in their minds, measuring progress, comparing trajectories, counting delays. And the moment reality fails to match that internal timeline, tension appears. This tension is rarely acknowledged. It disguises itself as motivation, ambition, or productivity. But underneath, it is impatience. And impatience is one of the most subtle forms of inner disorder. When you are impatient, you are not responding to reality. You are arguing with it. The Stoics understood that time is not neutral to those who resist it. Resistance turns time into pressure. Pressure distorts judgment. Distorted judgment leads to actions taken too early, too fast, or for the wrong reasons. What could have matured becomes rushed. What needed space becomes forced. And what required silence is drowned in noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote repeatedly about accepting the natural order of events, not as resignation, but as intelligence. He understood that everything unfolds according to causes far larger than individual desire. When you demand results before conditions are ready, you are not accelerating progress. You are interrupting formation. Many people abandon paths not because they are wrong, but because they are slow. They mistake delay for rejection and uncertainty for failure. Yet Seneca warned that nothing truly valuable is given cheaply or quickly. Depth requires time because depth requires transformation. And transformation cannot be rushed without being damaged. When you fight time, you start making decisions driven by anxiety. You change direction too often. You speak when silence would be wiser. You settle for less clarity just to feel movement. And although things may appear to be happening, alignment quietly collapses. Stoic patience is not passive waiting. It is active steadiness. It is continuing to act with integrity and discipline while refusing to panic about outcomes that are still forming beyond your sight. This is where inner strength is built, not in moments of success, but in moments where nothing seems to move and you remain composed anyway. The disciplined mind understands that preparation often happens invisibly. While you believe nothing is changing, perspective is sharpening. Judgment is maturing. Character is stabilizing. And when the moment arrives that demands action, you are no longer scrambling. You are ready. Alignment begins when you stop asking, "Why hasn't this happened yet?" and start asking, "Am I behaving as someone who could sustain what I'm asking for?" That question immediately shifts your focus from outcome to readiness. And readiness is always within your control. When your inner pace matches the pace of reality, something remarkable occurs. Anxiety loosens its grip. Decisions feel cleaner. You no longer feel late to your own life. You act when action is required, and you wait when waiting is wise. This discernment, knowing when to move and when to hold, is rare, and it changes how life responds to you. People sense when someone is not rushing. Opportunities tend to approach those who are not desperate to seize them. Conversations deepen. Choices simplify. And life begins to feel less like a race and more like a process you are cooperating with. Time stops feeling like an enemy because you stop resisting its rhythm. You no longer demand that life hurry. You prepare yourself to meet it properly when it arrives. The Stoic does not try to outrun time. He becomes steady enough to walk with it. Before we go any further, take a moment to support this message. Like this video if these ideas resonate with you and help bring clarity to your own life. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving Stoic reflections that strengthen discipline, inner order, and calm authority. And leave a comment sharing what part of your life you are trying to bring back into alignment right now. Your reflection might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. The third Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is this: resistance does not block the path, it reveals it. Most people see obstacles as proof that something is wrong, that life is opposing them, that they chose the wrong direction. And the moment resistance appears, they tense up, complain, or retreat. But the Stoics saw resistance very differently. They understood that difficulty is not a signal to stop, but a signal to adjust how you move. Marcus Aurelius captured this idea with brutal clarity when he wrote that what stands in the way becomes the way. This is not poetic optimism. It is practical realism. Every obstacle forces a refinement of character, strategy, or perception. Without resistance, there is no sharpening. Without friction, there is no strength. When you resent obstacles, you waste energy arguing with reality. You turn challenges into emotional burdens instead of strategic information. But when you accept resistance as part of the process, something shifts internally. You stop asking why this is happening and start asking how to move through it intelligently. Most people exhaust themselves not because life is hard, but because they fight what already exists. They resist delays, limitations, and imperfections as if those things were mistakes. But resistance is often life's way of preparing you for something that would break you if it arrived too early. The Stoics did not believe in a smooth path. They believed in a meaningful one. A path that shapes the traveler. When resistance appears, it is not a punishment. It is pressure, and pressure reveals weak structure. What cannot hold breaks. What is solid becomes stronger. Think about how often your greatest growth followed discomfort. The conversation you didn't want to have. The loss you didn't choose. The period of uncertainty that forced you to rethink everything. At the time, it felt like disruption. Looking back, it was alignment in disguise. When you accept resistance instead of resenting it, You conserve enormous amounts of energy. You stop fighting reality and start navigating it. You become adaptable instead of rigid, calm instead of reactive. And this adaptability makes you far more effective than force ever could. This does not mean you enjoy obstacles or pretend they don't hurt. Stoicism does not demand emotional numbness. It demands clarity. You feel the difficulty fully, but you do not let it dictate your behavior. You extract the lesson, adjust your approach, and continue forward with discipline. Alignment returns when you stop asking life to remove resistance and start asking yourself how to move correctly within it. When you do this, obstacles stop feeling personal. They become structural elements of your development. Life begins to cooperate with those who do not panic when challenged. Opportunities reveal themselves to those who stay composed under pressure. People trust those who do not collapse when things become difficult. Resistance does not mean you are off course. Often, it means you are exactly where refinement is required. The Stoic does not demand an easy path. He becomes capable enough to walk a difficult one without losing himself. The fourth Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is reclaiming inner authority. Most people live as if their inner state were something decided from the outside. Their mood shifts according to results. Their confidence rises and falls with approval. Their sense of worth depends on how others respond. Without realizing it, they hand control of their inner world to forces they do not command. The Stoics considered this one of the most dangerous forms of dependency. Not because outcomes do not matter, but because making your inner stability conditional on external events guarantees instability. When your peace depends on circumstances, you will never have peace for long. Circumstances are always changing. Epictetus was uncompromising on this point. He taught that no one can disturb your inner state unless you allow it. This idea sounds simple, but its implications are radical. It means that every emotional collapse contains an element of consent. Not consent to the event itself, but consent to letting that event dominate your internal order. When you lack inner authority, you react instead of respond. You feel pulled instead of grounded. You move through life in a constant state of adjustment, calibrating yourself to other people's moods, expectations, and judgments. This creates exhaustion, because you are never acting from center, only from reaction. Alignment begins the moment you reverse this hierarchy. When your inner state becomes the reference point, not the outcome. When you decide that your discipline, clarity, and self-respect are non-negotiable regardless of circumstances. This does not make you detached from life. It makes you stable within it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the tranquility of the soul comes from accepting what you cannot control and focusing entirely on what you can. Inner authority lives exactly there. You cannot command events, but you can command your posture toward them. You cannot control how others behave, but you can control the standard you hold yourself to. When inner authority is restored, decisions change. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop negotiating your values for comfort or approval. Your actions become simpler, cleaner, and more consistent. People feel this shift immediately. There is a weight to someone who is not internally negotiable. Not arrogance, but gravity. They do not rush. They do not overreact. They do not seek permission to be who they are. And because of this, they are trusted, even by those who disagree with them. Life aligns because your signals become clear. When your internal compass is stable, you stop sending mixed messages through anxious behavior. You stop sabotaging your own efforts with doubt. You stop abandoning what matters at the first sign of resistance. Inner authority also removes desperation. When your sense of worth is no longer tied to outcomes, you are free to pursue goals without fear of collapse. You can want deeply without needing desperately. And this changes how you act. You take risks more intelligently. You walk away when necessary. You remain steady when pressure rises. This is not emotional suppression. Stoicism does not ask you to feel less. It asks you to be ruled less. Emotions arise, but they do not issue commands. They inform, but they do not govern. You listen, then you decide. Alignment strengthens when your inner world stops being a battlefield. when you no longer argue with yourself about who you are or what you stand for, when your internal leadership becomes clear. Life responds to inner authority because confusion no longer leads your actions. Clarity does. The Stoic does not wait for the world to grant him stability. He establishes it within, and lets the world meet him there. The fifth Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is mastering the difference between action and agitation. Most people believe they are acting when, in reality, they are merely reacting. They stay busy, move constantly, fill every gap with effort, and call this progress. But the Stoics were deeply suspicious of movement without clarity. They understood that not all action moves you forward, and not all stillness means stagnation. Agitation is action driven by discomfort. It comes from the need to escape uncertainty, silence, or lack of immediate results. When agitation leads, effort multiplies but effectiveness shrinks. You do more, but achieve less. You speak more, but say less. You move faster, but lose direction. True action, in Stoic terms, is deliberate. It arises from clarity, not anxiety. It is measured, not compulsive. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to act with purpose and restraint, warning that a scattered mind produces scattered results. When your inner state is unstable, your actions reflect that instability. Many people sabotage alignment by mistaking urgency for importance. They rush decisions simply to relieve internal pressure. They say yes when they should pause. They force conversations before understanding their own position. And later, they wonder why things feel misaligned, despite all their effort. The Stoic does not fear stillness. Stillness is where judgment sharpens. It is where impulse weakens and discernment strengthens. When you allow yourself to pause without panic, you begin to see what truly requires action and what merely demands patience. Seneca wrote that the greatest obstacle to living is expectation. When you expect constant movement, you feel threatened by pauses. But many of life's most important shifts occur during apparent inactivity. Insight matures. Perspective deepens. Priorities rearrange themselves quietly. Alignment improves when you stop asking, "What can I do next?" and start asking, "What is actually required now?" Sometimes the correct answer is decisive action. Other times, it is restraint. Knowing the difference is wisdom. When action is aligned, it feels calm even when it is demanding. There is effort, but no inner chaos. You are not fighting yourself while moving. You are not second-guessing every step. This coherence allows your energy to concentrate instead of dissipate. People who master this law appear effective without appearing rushed. Their presence is grounded. Their words carry weight. Their decisions do not wobble under pressure. This is not because they do less, but because they act only when action has leverage. Life responds to aligned action because it removes unnecessary friction. You stop creating problems through overreaction. You stop exhausting yourself with tasks that do not matter. You stop interrupting processes that need time to unfold. This law also protects you from regret. Actions taken from agitation often demand correction later. Actions taken from clarity tend to endure. When you learn to wait without fear and act without hesitation, alignment stabilizes. The Stoic does not measure his worth by how much he moves, but by how correctly he moves. He understands that restraint is not weakness, and that patience is not delay. Both are forms of strength when guided by reason. When agitation no longer drives your behavior, life stops feeling chaotic. Movement becomes purposeful. Stillness becomes productive. And alignment deepens, not through force, but through precision. The sixth Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is learning to anchor your mind in sufficiency rather than lack. Most people move through life with a quiet sense that something essential is missing. More recognition, more certainty, more progress, more reassurance. This internal shortage mindset becomes the lens through which they interpret everything. And when lack becomes the reference point, no amount of achievement ever feels complete. The Stoics identified this as one of the primary sources of inner unrest. Seneca observed that it is not the person who has little who is poor, but the one who desires more. This was not a rejection of ambition. It was a warning about dependence. When your sense of completeness depends on future acquisition, peace is always postponed. A mind trained in sufficiency operates differently. It does not deny goals or dismiss improvement. It simply refuses to make fulfillment conditional. This distinction is subtle but decisive. When you believe you are incomplete, your actions carry urgency, comparison, and insecurity. When you recognize sufficiency, your actions carry steadiness, confidence, and focus. Alignment strengthens when you stop approaching life from hunger and start approaching it from grounding. Hunger distorts perception. It makes you chase what you do not need, tolerate what you should reject, and rush what should mature. Grounding sharpens judgment. It allows you to see clearly what actually matters. The Stoics practiced this grounding intentionally. They reminded themselves daily that they already possessed what was essential: the capacity to reason, to choose correctly, and to endure. Everything else was secondary. This mindset created an internal stability that no external shift could easily disturb. When sufficiency anchors the mind, comparison loses its grip. You stop measuring your path against other people's timelines. You stop interpreting others' success as your delay. You stop feeling threatened by outcomes that are not yours. And this frees enormous mental energy. Life aligns more easily when you are not internally negotiating your worth. You no longer pursue goals to prove something. You pursue them because they are meaningful. This changes the quality of effort completely. There is intention without tension. People who operate from sufficiency are magnetic in a quiet way. Not because they demand attention, but because they are not asking for permission. They are not seeking validation through noise. Their calm communicates self-respect. And self-respect invites respect. This law also protects you from overreaching. When lack drives you, you overextend. You accept conditions that compromise your values. You say yes when you should walk away. Sufficiency allows you to choose more carefully, to wait, to decline without fear. The Stoic does not convince himself that everything is fine when it is not. He simply refuses to believe that something external must change before he can be stable. Stability comes first. From there, action becomes cleaner. Alignment deepens when you stop thinking in terms of once I have, and start thinking in terms of while I am. While I am here. While I am learning. While I am becoming. This presence removes pressure from the future and strength from the present. When sufficiency replaces lack, life stops feeling like a deficit to be corrected. It becomes a field to be navigated wisely. Progress still matters. Growth still matters. But they are no longer driven by fear. The Stoic understands that wanting more is human. Needing more to be whole is the trap. When you escape that trap, life begins to meet you with less resistance. The seventh Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is emotional sovereignty. Most people believe their emotions are reactions to the world. Something happens, and the emotion follows. Praise brings confidence. Rejection brings doubt. Loss brings collapse. This belief quietly places the command of your inner state outside of yourself. And whatever controls your inner state ends up controlling your life. The Stoics rejected this idea completely. They understood that events do not generate emotions. Interpretations do. What you feel is shaped not by what happens, but by the meaning you assign to what happens. This insight is uncomfortable because it removes excuses, but it is also liberating because it restores agency. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most emotional pain is not caused by the event itself, but by the story we tell ourselves about what it means. When this story runs unchecked, emotions dominate behavior. When it is examined, emotions become information instead of commands. Emotional sovereignty does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending they do not exist. Stoicism does not advocate numbness. It advocates mastery. You feel fully, but you do not obey blindly. You experience anger without becoming destructive. You experience fear without surrendering to paralysis. You experience sadness without allowing it to define you. Alignment begins when emotions stop driving decisions. When you create a pause between stimulus and response. That pause is where freedom lives. It is the space where reason re-enters and choice becomes possible again. Most people act at the peak of emotion and regret it later. They speak when they should wait. They react when they should observe. Emotional sovereignty reverses this pattern. You allow the emotion to rise, peak, and pass without handing it the steering wheel. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to observe his impressions before agreeing with them. This practice alone transforms how life feels. You no longer feel constantly attacked by circumstances. You begin to see events as neutral until judged otherwise. When emotional sovereignty is practiced consistently, stability emerges. Not because life becomes gentle, but because your inner structure becomes resilient. Chaos may still exist around you, but it no longer spreads inside you. This stability has consequences. People sense when someone is not emotionally volatile. They trust them more. They respect their judgment. They feel safer around them. Opportunities gravitate toward those who can remain composed under pressure. Life aligns because emotional turbulence stops interfering with clear action. You stop sabotaging yourself through impulsive decisions. You stop escalating situations unnecessarily. You conserve energy that would otherwise be spent repairing damage caused by emotional reaction. This law also restores dignity. When you are no longer dragged by your emotional states, you carry yourself differently. You do not beg for reassurance. You do not chase validation. You do not collapse under criticism. Your responses are measured, not automatic. The Stoic understands that emotions are signals, not orders. They provide information, not direction. When you treat them accordingly, inner clarity strengthens and outer confusion weakens. Alignment deepens when you stop asking how to avoid emotions and start asking how to govern them. Mastery is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of command. The eighth Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is living in accordance with your own nature instead of performing for expectations. Many people live fractured lives. Their thoughts go in one direction, their words in another, and their actions in yet another. Over time, this internal division creates resistance. Not resistance from the world, but resistance within the self. The Stoics believe that nature is orderly, and that human suffering often begins when we act against our own nature. Not against desire, but against reason. When you consistently behave in ways that contradict what you know to be right, alignment erodes quietly. You may still achieve results, but they feel hollow. You may still move forward, but with constant inner friction. Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to act as if he had 10,000 years to live. He meant that life is too short to waste energy on roles that do not reflect who you are becoming. Authentic action, for the Stoic, is not self-expression in the modern sense. It is self-coherence. Thinking, speaking, and acting from the same internal axis. When your inner and outer lives contradict each other, confusion grows. You hesitate more. You doubt yourself more. You seek reassurance more often. And this uncertainty seeps into everything you do. People sense inconsistency even when they cannot explain it. Alignment strengthens when you reduce this internal contradiction. When you stop saying yes to things that violate your values. When you stop pursuing goals that impress others but leave you empty. When you stop adjusting your identity to fit every environment you enter. Living according to your nature requires courage, because it removes camouflage. You can no longer hide behind approval, trends, or borrowed ambitions. You must take responsibility for your choices and accept the consequences of being clear. The Stoics understood that authenticity simplifies life. When your actions match your principles, decisions require less effort. You no longer negotiate with yourself at every step. You know where you stand. And this clarity becomes a stabilizing force. Life aligns more easily when you are internally aligned. You stop sending mixed signals through inconsistent behavior. You stop attracting situations that conflict with your values. You stop creating problems through self-betrayal. This law does not promise comfort. It promises integrity. And integrity has a strange effect on reality. It filters. What does not belong begins to fall away. What fits begins to remain. Relationships become cleaner. Commitments become fewer but stronger. Direction becomes clearer. The Stoic does not attempt to be admired. He attempts to be correct in his conduct. He understands that approval is unstable, but character is durable. And when character becomes the reference point, life becomes less chaotic. Living in accordance with your nature does not mean refusing growth. It means growing deliberately. Choosing who you become instead of drifting into roles assigned by circumstance. Alignment deepens when your inner voice no longer argues with your actions. When you no longer feel divided. When your life feels like a single direction instead of competing impulses. The Stoic does not ask life to fit his identity. He shapes his identity carefully, then lives it without contradiction. The ninth Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is learning to trust order without surrendering responsibility. Many people confuse trust with passivity. They believe that if they stop forcing outcomes, they must also stop caring, planning, or acting. The Stoics rejected this false choice. For them, trust was not resignation. It was cooperation with an order larger than impulse. At the center of Stoic philosophy is the idea that the universe operates according to reason. Not according to personal preference, but according to cause, consequence, and necessity. When you fight this order, life feels chaotic. When you deny it, life feels unfair. But when you recognize it and work within it, clarity emerges. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that whatever happens is either endurable or not. If it is endurable, then endure it properly. If it is not, then it ends, and so does the suffering. This mindset does not eliminate difficulty, but it eliminates panic. And panic is what most often destroys alignment. Trusting order means understanding that not every outcome is a verdict on your worth. Some events are structural. Some delays are necessary. Some endings are corrective. When you interpret everything personally, you add emotional weight where none is required. This weight clouds judgment and weakens resolve. The Stoic learns to separate effort from outcome. Effort belongs to you. Outcome belongs to the order of things. When you confuse the two, frustration grows. When you respect the boundary, steadiness appears. You do what is correct, then release the demand that life confirm you immediately. This law stabilizes ambition. Instead of striving blindly, you strive with awareness. You recognize when persistence is required and when adjustment is wiser. You stop clinging to forms and start respecting function. What matters is not that things happen your way, but that they happen in a way that preserves your integrity. Trusting order also refines patience. You no longer assume that delay means failure. You no longer sabotage progress by constantly interfering. You allow processes to unfold while staying attentive and prepared. This balance between vigilance and acceptance is rare and powerful. People who live by this law appear grounded. They are not shaken by every fluctuation. They do not collapse when plans change. They adapt without losing direction. This adaptability is not weakness. It is intelligence. Alignment improves because your expectations become realistic. You stop demanding certainty from a world that operates on complexity. You stop asking life to simplify itself for your comfort. And in return, life stops resisting you as forcefully. Trusting order does not mean abandoning standards. It means holding them internally instead of projecting them onto reality. You remain disciplined. You remain attentive. You remain responsible. But you no longer carry the illusion that everything should respond on your timetable. The Stoic understands that peace comes not from controlling the sequence of events, but from controlling his participation in them. When this understanding settles, anxiety loosens its grip. Life begins to feel less adversarial. Not because it becomes easier, but because you stop interpreting difficulty as betrayal. You recognize it as structure. This law aligns life by removing the friction created by false expectations. When expectation becomes reasonable, effort becomes effective. The 10th Stoic law that aligns life in your favor is embracing impermanence without fear. Most people live as if stability were something permanent that must be achieved and then protected at all costs. They cling to roles, relationships, identities, and outcomes as if losing them would mean losing themselves. This attachment creates constant anxiety, because anything that depends on permanence is always under threat. The Stoics trained themselves to see impermanence not as a problem, but as a fundamental condition of life. Everything changes. Every position shifts. Every phase ends. When you resist this truth, life feels hostile. When you accept it, life becomes workable. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he would meet people who were ungrateful, unpredictable, and flawed, not because life was unfair, but because change and imperfection are part of human nature. This preparation did not make him cynical. It made him resilient. Fear of loss distorts judgment. It makes you overprotect what should evolve. It makes you stay where growth has already ended. It makes you compromise principles to preserve comfort. And the more you cling, the more fragile your position becomes. Alignment strengthens when you loosen this grip. When you understand that nothing external is meant to be possessed permanently. That roles are temporary. That success is a phase, not an identity. That loss does not erase value. It reveals what was never under your control. The Stoic does not deny attachment. He manages it. He enjoys what is present without demanding that it remain unchanged. This balance allows him to engage fully without becoming dependent. When impermanence is accepted, courage increases. You are more willing to act honestly because you are less afraid of consequences. You are more willing to leave situations that no longer align because you trust your capacity to endure transition. This law also sharpens gratitude. When you understand that nothing is guaranteed, presence deepens. You pay attention. You stop postponing meaning. You treat moments with care because you know they are finite. Life aligns because fear stops dictating decisions. You stop organizing your behavior around avoiding loss. You stop shrinking to preserve stability. And in doing so, you become more capable of adapting to change. People who accept impermanence carry a quiet confidence. They are not desperate to secure every outcome. They are not paralyzed by uncertainty. They know that whatever shifts, they remain responsible for their character. The Stoic understands that change is not the enemy of order. It is part of it. What matters is not preserving form, but preserving principle. Alignment deepens when you stop asking how to make things last and start asking how to live correctly while they do. This perspective removes urgency and replaces it with composure. Life becomes less about holding on and more about moving wisely. Less about protecting identity and more about refining it. The Stoic does not seek permanence in circumstances. He seeks steadiness in himself. And when steadiness is internal, life can change without destroying balance. When you look at these 10 Stoic laws together, a pattern becomes clear. None of them promise shortcuts. None of them offer guarantees. And none of them ask life to bend itself to your desires. Instead, they all point to the same direction. Order within before order without. Alignment is not something you attract. It is something you create by removing what distorts your judgment and weakens your conduct. The Stoics never believed that life would become easy. They believed it could become coherent. And coherence changes everything. When your inner world stops contradicting reality, friction decreases. When your actions stop fighting your principles, energy concentrates. When your expectations become reasonable, disappointment loses its power. These laws are not techniques to control outcomes. They are disciplines to control yourself. Internal control, cooperation with time, acceptance of resistance, inner authority, deliberate action, sufficiency over lack, emotional sovereignty, living according to your nature, trust in order, acceptance of impermanence. Each one removes a different form of inner chaos. When chaos is removed, life does not magically obey you, but it stops resisting you unnecessarily. You begin to move through events with less noise, less panic, less self-sabotage. Decisions become simpler. Relationships become cleaner. Direction becomes clearer. Many people search for alignment as if it were a reward waiting in the future. But alignment is not found. It is practiced daily, quietly, often invisibly. It shows itself not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in how you handle pressure, delay, rejection, and uncertainty. The Stoic does not wait for the perfect conditions to live correctly. He lives correctly regardless of conditions. And this is why life begins to respond differently. Not because he demands it, but because his presence no longer creates unnecessary resistance. When you stop chasing outcomes, you start shaping character. When you stop forcing results, you start earning stability. When you stop arguing with reality, you start understanding it. This is where real power lives, not in controlling events, but in remaining grounded no matter how events unfold. Alignment is not passive. It is disciplined cooperation. You still act. You still choose. You still pursue what matters. But you do so without desperation, without illusion, and without betraying yourself in the process. This is what the Stoics meant by living in accordance with nature. Not escaping struggle, but meeting it with clarity. Not eliminating uncertainty, but becoming steady within it. Not manifesting a perfect life, but becoming capable of handling the life you are given. When this happens, things begin to fall into place, not because you demanded them, but because you stopped blocking them with inner disorder. If this message brought clarity to you, like this video so it can reach more people who need calm, discipline, and direction in a noisy world. Subscribe to the channel for more Stoic wisdom that strengthens inner order and steady action. And leave a comment sharing which of these laws you feel you need to practice most right now, or what part of your life you are working to bring back into alignment. Your reflection might be the exact reminder someone else needs today. Stay steady, stay disciplined, and walk forward without fighting the path.